So we're getting ready to head out to the to Molochansk. I got to take some garbage out, and we'll be getting on the road here hopefully before too long. Cool, brisk morning here in Kiev. Weather's a little overcast. It seems like the weather should get nicer as we head out. So that'll be welcome, because this fall weather is way too cold for me, and it's just starting, so I'm sure it's going to get a lot colder in the coming weeks. Here's our ride to Zafranicha. Hopefully we'll get there. It's only, 8-9 hours. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I guess I'd sure like to ride in this, but I guess that's not an option. Alright, well, we'll be off shortly. We're in the village of Semenivka and watching the train here that's coming through town. It blocked the road. There's my first subscriber there on the front of the train. As we leave Semenivka, we'll be back on the highway. It was interesting. We were driving and this road is just beat to shit. And there was this highway sign that looked like it had been out here for a long time that said, this is part of the highway project. The president of Ukraine is, sponsoring to fix the roads. So, I think we're all just waiting. I'm going to talk a little bit about my family ancestors and what their ties are to Ukraine, which also was part of the reason why I decided to come to Ukraine, and I wanted to further dig into my family history and see where they lived in Ukraine, and try to learn a little bit more about their life and culture while they were in Ukraine. So my ancestors are Mennonite. I'm not a practicing Mennonite, but the Mennonite faith is very similar in some ways to Amish, which a lot of people are more familiar with, I think, because of their the Amish is very old school, traditional religious values that they still maintain today, part of the not embracing technology as much as the rest of us, or as much as Mennonites, and still using like horse and buggy is very popular in Pennsylvania. Whereas the Mennonites, while both religions came from the Anabaptists, the Mennonites embraced more of a non-violent peacemaker type of mentality. The Mennonites integrated more with local cultures, where the Amish tended to be more kept to themselves in a tighter group. We're in Kremenchuk, still a couple hundred kilometers away from Dnipro, but I thought we'd stop and take a look at this monument that was dedicated to those who died at the hands of the Germans during World War II. And so as you can see, there are this is kind of the suffering of the people that occurred during that time, and this is a monument to all those who suffered. And that there is also an eternal flame that's burning. The Mennonites spent a lot of time as missionaries trying to spread their faith throughout the world, and their values. As they were living in Prussia at the time, I think near northern Poland, there was a lot of fighting going on, and that's what prompted them to look elsewhere to settle. And during that time, I think we're talking the late 1700s, there was a movement in Ukraine, or Russia at the time, to have people settle in southern Ukraine area, and Catherine the Great invited the Mennonites to come down and settle in southern Ukraine, and promised them, land to farm, as well as they wouldn't have to serve in the military or practice military drills. So they came to Ukraine, which had great soil for farming, and they settled in like I said, the southern central part of Ukraine. And at the time, it was called the Molochansk region. And I'm probably slaughtering the pronunciations on these words, but it's the best I'm doing with what I know of the limited pronunciation skills that I have for Russian words. Hey guys, so we just found a monument dedicated to the Cossacks, and with this being the military holiday to celebrate the military and the Cossacks, truly a Ukrainian holiday, and so I wanted to stop and take a video of this beautiful memorial, or I guess monument, not necessarily memorial, but it's been set up with some great flags and stuff for today. I'm sure it's dedicated to today's holiday. Looks super. We stopped to have lunch here at the beautiful Dnieper River Valley. When they settled, they actually started renaming a number of the cities after German towns. So where my ancestors settled was an area they called Petershagen, and also Halberstadt. That's where my grandfather and my grandmother's sides of the family on my father's side came and settled. My grandfather's side in Halberstadt, which today is called Molochansk, and Petershagen kind of went away and isn't much of a city anymore, but it still exists as kind of an area outside of Molochansk, about 2 kilometers apart. So between the late 18th century to the late 19th century, my family lived in southern Ukraine, and at the end of the late 19th century, there was a movement within Russia to start having men, including the Mennonites, train and serve in military service. Because the Mennonites are pacifists and peacemakers by nature, serving in the military was not something that they wanted to do, nor was it something they were willing to do. So because of this, they sought somewhere else to go. And at the time, the Civil War had just ended in the United States, and there was a big movement to settle the plains regions of the United States. So as part of the Homestead Act of 1862 and subsequent laws that were passed following that initial Homestead Act that was signed by President Lincoln, any U.S. citizen or intended citizen who hadn't taken up arms against the United States government during the Civil War were allowed to lay claim to land in the United States and settle in the Great Plains. So I want to take a moment to basically read out of my family book here an excerpt of, on my grandmother's side, the Peters family. And this talks in general about the Mennonite migrations, but it also talks specifically in a couple points about the Peters family. So I would like to take a moment to, I guess, read through this, so bear with me. It's educational for some and maybe good research information for other people who are researching any Mennonite heritage. It was about 1780 when the limits of the Russian Empire were being extended during the reign of Catherine the Great. An invitation was offered to the Mennonites from Prussia to settle on the vast plains of southern Russia, known as the Ukraine. Tchoritsa was one of the first Mennonite settlements to be established. Then in 1803, the Molochansk was opened for settlement. This is a settlement to which the Peters family moved in 1816. Many privileges were granted to them, such as exemption from military service, the establishment of their own villages, and the management of their own schools in the German language. These privileges lasted nearly 100 years. Then in the 1870s, all young men were subject to military training. Where could they go from here? During this time, the Great Plains of America opened for settlement. Civil War veterans and homesteaders were granted free land in Nebraska and in other states. Land agents were busy getting Europeans interested in coming to the land of opportunity. Then the Mennonites from Russia sent out a delegation of men to investigate the possibility of settling in America. In July 1874, several hundred families left Russia for America. The nearest railway station was in Halberstadt, where they boarded the train. From here it took 6 days to travel to the German border. Another 2-day journey took them across northern Germany to Hamburg. The seaport of Hamburg is where the immigrants embarked on the SS Cimbria. 4 days later, another group left on the Teutonia, a freighter, which had been converted to a passenger ship. Fire broke out one night, and everyone feared what might happen. After 17 days on the Atlantic Ocean, the ship landed safely in the harbor of New York City. It is believed that the ship was lost at sea on its return voyage. The immigrants stayed at Castle Gardens for 3 days. Here they prepared for their journey westward. A 4-day train trip brought them to Lincoln, Nebraska. Here the Burlington Railroad had built an immigrant house about where the state fairgrounds are located today. They stayed here for the next 5 weeks. From here, the land agents took the men out to show them places for settlement. First they were taken to Franklin County, but the immigrants were not impressed with the sandy and rough land. They also thought the wells were too deep. They then asked for a better place, or else they would go to Kansas, where many of the other settlers had gone. Being influenced by the German settlers, for them to live in their vicinity near Sutton, the land agents then took them to the western part of York County and the eastern part of Hamilton County. Civil War veterans and homesteaders had already settled every other section provided by the Homestead Act. The Burlington Railroad Company owned the other sections. Nebraska granted religious freedom to the Mennonites, which encouraged them to stay. They then reserved or purchased 6,500 acres of land from the railroad company itself. The terms for this purchase was $3.50 an acre in cash or $6 an acre on a long-term easy payment plan with low interest. On October 12, 1874, only 35 families decided to settle in Nebraska, while most of the others decided to move to Kansas or to Minnesota. After they arrived in Sutton, Nebraska, by train, they then moved northward with their wagons to partially finished immigrant house. This house was 80 feet long and 24 feet wide, in which more than 200 persons stayed the first night. After that, some families stayed with homesteaders who could speak the German language. Due to the lateness of the season, all were anxious to build some sort of shelter for the first winter. This then is the beginning of the migration movement of the Mennonites to Henderson, Nebraska, from 1874 into the 1880s. on my grandmother's side, one of the people who was instrumental in bringing the Mennonites to America, and some of the troubles he got into when they started vacating Russia. And this is again in the later part of the 19th century. One outstanding leader during the immigration period was Isaac Peters. His activities urging Mennonites to immigrate brought him into trouble with Russian authorities. When he was ordered to leave Russia, Isaac took his wife and daughter to Prussia, where they stayed for about 5 weeks. From there, they continued their journey to America, arriving in the Heinrich Epp home on January 10, 1875. After purchasing a farm on the Blue River, he continued to write letters encouraging more Mennonites to choose Nebraska as a good place to live. The deep water veins seemed to be a big hindrance for the settlers, but the objections were not that strong. The climate was favorable and the quality of the land was good. The railroad company was also very liberal and accommodating to those who settled on their land. Through payments and shipping their freight from the east, they allowed 2 years without interest to those who bought land on a 10-year credit, and also to those poor brothers in need. They carried lumber and machinery from the east for half the cost of freight. Peters also writes that taking advantage of the offers of the railroad company should not be their chief purpose for coming, but rather to strengthen their faith and spiritual knowledge, which was the desire of his heart. We're at the hotel in Zafanisa. It's a really nice hotel here. I think it was probably about $80 tonight. Is this Greta Garbo? I'm not sure. Good comment. All right, guys, we're going to go get something to eat. There's a train, a little metro going through town. Looks pretty cool. We go into the hotel restaurant. Here's another monument dedicated to the World War II. You'll find these just littered all over Ukraine. They were put up by the Russians, but it's definitely something you'll see everywhere. Like I say, see these in the middle of nowhere. So I thought I'd stop so that people could see what we're seeing. So here, I'll turn it over to the monument. It's very interesting at these monuments. What I've noticed, I don't, not to say they all generally have the same theme, but you always see these men with guns and fighting, and these looks on their faces. This kind of without features, but with emotions of just anger and struggle, but very strong. Ever pronounced. Look at these arms on these guys. But so anyway, that's it. In June of 1878, Isaac Peters was on his way to New York City to meet two of his brothers, Johann and Dietrich, and their families. While en route, he preached in a number of meeting houses in the Elkhart area. Previous arrangements had been made for C.F. Funk from Elkhart to accompany him on this trip. 2 days were spent visiting with the Brotherhood in Lincoln County, Canada, where services were held. On Friday, they continued on their way. An hour was spent at the Great Falls of Niagara. At 7 o'clock Saturday morning, they arrived in New York City. On July 1st, the steamer Strasburg was brought to her landing at Hoboken, New Jersey, on the west shore of the North River. The voyagers were glad they had reached their destination, having been on the water for 15 and a half days. 653 people were on this steamship. Everyone enjoyed good health after the first few days of seasickness were over. 2 babies were born during this voyage. As soon as the baggage was brought out of the vessel, it passed under the inspection of the customs officer. They were then taken to Castle Garden, where emigrants are requested to land. Here they remained during the day. That afternoon, money was exchanged and tickets were purchased for their destination. By evening, the whole party with their baggage was transferred across the river to the Erie Depot in Jersey City. At 10 o'clock, the Peters families were aboard the train which was moving westward. Among the group was a young boy by the name of Isaac D. Peters, who remembers the day they stopped in Chicago. It was the 4th of July, when Americans were celebrating this national holiday. Of this, he writes, "Each of us had a bundle loosely hanging from the neck and were flat barefooted. The young people especially were amused by the sight of us. They kept throwing firecrackers at our bare feet. While this was a dramatic experience for us, for the people of Chicago it must have been a humorous picture." The group arrived in Sutton, Nebraska on July 6, 1878, where Klaus Friesen met us at the station. He took us with our bags and baggage 10 miles northward to his farmstead, where we stayed for a while. This was the beginning of life in America.